Hello and welcome to the webinar. This is a journey through security maturity, Splunk's webinar series. This is part 2 of a 3-part series where we're looking at years 3 to 4 into security operations and what you should really be looking for. So my name is Ben Marrable. I'm a security strategist here at Somerford Associates. I've been dealing with the Splunk technology for many years now across the entire Splunk security suite. So hopefully I can give you a good guidance as to what we're actually looking at and how Splunk can really help you with security maturity. So what do I plan to go through? If you join me for part 1, thank you very much. You'll get a little bit of familiarity here. So really we're going to do another little reintroduction to maturity modeling, just to reiterate the points that were made up there. Then we're going to look at the Splunk security data journey and where we're going to levels 3 and 4 now, and how we kind of align to that for these 3rd and 4th years. And also we're going to go into Splunk and how Splunk can really help move you forward using the tool sets that's available there. So I talked about this last time, the capability maturing model, very much based on a development model that was created in 1986. It's been changed, but ultimately it gives you the kind of 5 levels of process improvement to be able to take yourself from ad hoc to active optimization of processes, right? And security operations can be looked at as a process essentially. So where last time we talked about initial and going from initial to being repeatable, now we can start thinking about actually standardizing, defining these processes and managing them, measuring them, making sure that we have an understanding of what they are. And then in part 3, we'll talk about optimizing and moving it to the next sort of level. So we can see how it kind of all flows together. So what do we mean by security maturity? Again, we talked about this last time, but there are many different versions out there. They basically share the same sort of principle. That principle being a mapping of an organization's security posture in relation to the business requirements. So we're trying to understand how mature we are in line with what the business requires, right? So one business may be more mature, but may not need to have the same sort of level of technologies or people or processes in place because their industry, that doesn't really apply. Okay, whereas another industry that might have a lot of different compliance requirements and so forth may actually need to get more people, processes, technology in place to be able to meet those and therefore become more mature. So it's really relevant to what's actually required for the business. But the idea is to map ourselves as to where we are. So we've got a current state and an end state, and how we can kind of, that gives us an idea, a strategy to place to actually move up and become more secure and get better practice, right? So effectively understanding it basically allows you to get a better understanding of cyber risks facing the business and really kind of look at being able to mature yourselves further and enhancing your security practice. Okay, so that's why we do security maturity. That's why it's all out there in conversation, is really being able to understand your current state, where you want to get to as a goal state or an end state. So first time we talked about repeatability. So let's look about how we can progress from repeatability or repeatable processes into defined and managed. Okay, so the first thing we want to look at is looking at how we can move to a kind of a defined or measured approach and a manageable approach. So what are the key priorities here? Recording and tracking meaningful metrics. When we say meaningful, we honestly mean controllable and meaningful metrics. So things like mean time to respond, mean time to resolve, and things that are actually all relevant and controllable, right? The number of alerts that you get is not necessarily controllable because it could just be a very busy day and so forth. So if you've got more alerts one day to the other day, it's not really a metric that kind of actually helps you. Absolutely do that per actual event, per trigger correlation search. If you're adding additional notable events in there, or search detections effectively, then you want to measure the effectiveness and how they go and have kind of over time periods of how that's occurring, right? So how many did we get for this week or this month or so forth, not a specific small meaning in time. Okay, so just have a good metrics that allows us to measure what our effectiveness of it. Okay, so if everything's been defined, we know what we're controlling, what variables we've got control of. Okay, we then measure that, and then what we can really do is kind of think about how we can refine and reform SecOps in order to reduce these key metrics wherever possible, right? So we want to kind of reduce the metrics and bring those down if they're you know, if they're metrics that need to be lowered, or if they're things that need to be increased, we need to improve them essentially wherever we possibly can. So we need to have process in place, repeatable processes in place to better our processes that we're currently running. So how does this map to Splunk security data journey? Let's have a look. So there, again, this is a 6-stage process, always focusing on data collection, extracting value from the data. Those are the 6 stages, but in this situation, we're still focusing on stage 3 and stage 4. Okay, so we've already got the foundations of collection and normalization. Now we're thinking about actually how we can expand that. So we've got metrics, we define them. How can we expand the data coverage to utilize other technologies with the goal of reducing your mean time to respond, right? So if you bring in endpoint data, you may get more alerts, absolutely. But what it actually means is you're responding to the threat and the malicious actor much quicker, because you might be seeing events that are occurring much earlier, right? So the idea is you're actually responding to a threat a lot earlier by having additional data sources in there. So expansion is going to really help with that, and then enriching that sort of things to enhance them, right? So we're reducing the mean time to resolve, because now an analyst has a lot more data that they can use and leverage and be able to actually get out and understand what's the impact of this event, how important it is, and it's all just presented to them. And this might be where we're thinking about other techniques of alerting, such as RBA, risk-based alerting, and that sort of things. Okay, this isn't a risk-based alerting or a notable event kind of webinar series. The idea here is to kind of get an understanding of what the metrics we need to be from a kind of high-level position in security operations. So with that, let's go and have a look at Splunk itself. So I'm going to come straight into Splunk Security Essentials here. This is the security data journey shown within Splunk Security Essentials. Here we're going to look at stage 3 and stage 4. So again, if you remember from last time, each stage has a description, a number of milestones that you would expect to see, and challenges that you might face. And as you progress through these, you'll also see the amount of applicable security use cases that you can kind of do in different security areas, right? Whether that's security monitoring, compliance, incident response, or whatever, right? And down at the bottom, you'll see the data sources that can kind of add to, and this is what the kind of data sources we would expect to be bringing in at this stage. So whereas previously it was like network firewall data or authentication logs, now we're looking at a very protocol specific wire data, so DNS, DHCP, very useful data sets. We're also talking about endpoint in a much more granular way now, so not just Windows event logs, but now we're talking about Sysmon, we're talking about Carbon Black or any sort of other EDR tool, and having a lot better kind of data that we can then correlate with to get us to the next sort of level. And then when we look at enrichment, if we move to the next thing, now we're talking about adding in threat intelligence feeds. We're talking about other sort of data, IP URL block lists, anything that might be really interesting insights to actually add to the data sets. Of course, we've already got assets and identities in here. Maybe we're enriching those assets and identities from covering more kind of categories, providing to them, so we can kind of see maybe better business units, you know, all this sort of great stuff that can kind of help us in reducing that mean time to resolve by bringing down the time an analyst spends on actually looking and investigating through this type of event. So the other thing that you can notice in Splunk Security Essentials or look for now is that actually in the journey stage, we can now expand stages 3 and 4, right? So we're looking at these next sort of stages. We're going to get more deeper detections based on wider kind of scope of use cases. And as we scroll through stage 1 and into stage 2 and then into stage 3, you can see a lot of different kind of use cases that are going to be popping up. Now I filtered based on them being featured, so kind of highest value according to essentially Splunk's security SMEs. It's highly recommended, shall we say. The ones that aren't featured doesn't mean they're not recommended for you or useful for your business. It just means that they're not as common and prevalent out there as relevance, but that might be very indicative of something that you want to look at. And of course, you could look at it from analytic stories as well. And then into stage 4, where we've got enrichment and getting to the kind of highest level sort of things. So they can kind of get to the next level. So as you progress through your security operations, you can also progress through your security detections and add in extra thing you want to be looking for. which can kind of enrich that data. So look, getting a list of privileged user accounts, so making sure that that kind of thing can add in the enrichment that's needed to understand what might be of use and all that sort of thing. So so yeah, just progress through, and as you'll get more detections and you'll get more kind of uses out of the technology suite. Now, in sort of stages 3 and 4, we tend to kind of look at, this is where we've got a repeatable security operations, and we're kind of already understanding what's going on in security, and using Splunk, and we might have just recently acquired Splunk Enterprise Security, or we might look into Enterprise Security. So this is really where security, Enterprise Security will really kick off and then kind of add to the process. So from a tool set, ES is where Splunk is put in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for SIEM. ES is the SIEM technology. It's the one that's analyzed and puts Splunk in the leadership kind of column or area, top right corner. And so this is really when you're kind of implementing a SIEM technology. So no longer are we just thinking about logging and monitoring. Now we're looking at security incident event management, kind of an end-to-end piece. And so hopefully I'm going to kind of show you kind of how we can get the metrics out of this, how we can kind of measure what's kind of very interesting. Okay, so one of the first points of this is that you would come into an enterprise security is the security posture page, right? And inside security posture, you've got a completely configurable dashboard. Across the top, you've got key indicators, and these are metrics that you want to be looking at. These are completely configurable, so you can add in your own ones or that are relevant. Now, and the reason I've left off the mean time to resolve, mean time to respond metrics from this dashboard is because they're actually included in a different one. But so this is just out of the box what it looks like. Okay, I haven't tweaked anything here, but it is possible to tweak everything that you wish to. This environment's only been running for a couple of hours, so data is only kind of looking like it's only happened over a couple of hours. It's all demo data. But what you will see is a lot of different metrics across the top, key security indicators, things that we want to be looking at, all those sort of metrics right front and visible to everything that you want to see. You've got notable events by urgency. So generally an analyst would come into this dashboard as the first point of call and maybe look at the different high or critical level of urgencies, certainly look at critical first and kind of start dealing from there. You can see the top notable events by the rule. With a corresponding spark line, and that spark line might be important because let's say it's excessive failed logins, which this one is, and it might be indicative of a sort of if it's looking like a heartbeat, it's probably indicative of a scripted attack as opposed to everybody keep mistyping their password at 9 AM in the morning, right? So you kind of get an idea where the spark line actually improves that. And then you can also see the event sources, and you can see the notable events over time. So if you then click on any of this, it actually drills down into the incident review, which is kind of your first point of where you would want to go as an analyst to start looking at the areas, the notable events, and what you need to be actioning, right? So these are the security incidents and alerts. And again, if we're talking about reducing numbers or going into risk and all that sort of thing, come to one of those webinars if that's interesting to you. You want to have a look at how RBA works and all that sort of thing. This is really just a kind of an intro to ES and how ES can kind of level you up, but also how you can get the metrics out of ES. So if you've got ES and it's in play and you want to understand how the metrics kind of pick together, we'll go into that. So we've got a number of notables being displayed. We can expand on any of these. So this is geographical and probable accesses for FireDoor. So as we expand on one of them, we can see the description of what actually happened. We can see a number of different things that have been pulled out of the actual event. So where they came from before, where they went to afterwards, who their user account is, a bit more details around them, where they're based, all the different types of user account IDs that they might have associated with them, all pulled out of the identity list. Because we're adding assets and identities to enrich this data set. We can see the original events on the right-hand side. We can see the correlation search. And if we want to go into the correlation search and start tweaking that, we can do that from here as well. We can also see contributing events, and we can see the history, right? So if we want to go and see who's been doing what to this, we can go ahead and do that as well. But one thing that we might want to do is go, okay, I want to explore this user a bit more, right? What we can do is just pivot from here and have a look maybe what access, where they've been logging in using the access search. We can maybe look into the identity center to see what they've been doing, what are details around the actual user account. We can go into the identity investigator and get a view, which I'll come to in a moment. We can see what malware they might have been involved in. We can see user activity for them and so forth. So there's lots of different ways of how we can pivot around the results, the field values that come out here. So let's have a look to see where this user account has been logging on. So we're going to click here and go to the access search, and this will show us all the different kind of combinations of destination sources where they might be logging into or from. So we can see they've been doing it in different applications and all sorts. And you'll see across the top the accelerated data coming back very quickly, and then the raw data sets coming back a bit slower. So we can see all the events from both different perspectives, from a statistics perspective, from accelerated data models, and also from the raw data. And as I said, I'll go and have a look in the identity center. So let's go ahead and have a look at that. So this looks at this. I didn't mean the identity center. As I said, I was going to have a look at the identity investigator. So let's go and have a look at that. This takes us to the identity investigator, populates that user account. So here we can see all the details around that user account from the identity framework. So here we've got the user account, where they normally work, how important they are to the business, they're a critical person. We've got a location data, we've got a phone number, we've got a manager, hobby. So we've got all the details that we want to see, start date, end date, that sort of stuff as well. And then below, what we see is all the different events that they've been involved in. So again, since this data has only been a small period, let's focus in on what we've actually got data from. So we'll reload these swim lanes as it comes up. Each swim lane can be looked at as a kind of a view into each of the individual data uses, data sources, right? So, and the benefit here is really to be able to understand how you can kind of see patterns that are occurring, right? So you might see a number of failed authentications followed by a successful one. Then you might see a connection to a known command and control center with the threat data. You might then see a change to a registry key. Then you might see some enumeration of file system looking through it all. Then you might see some data being exposed, exfiltrated. You know, you could get a really kind of an interesting thing, but it's not necessarily one, then the next, and the next, and the next. It could be a bunch here, and then a success, and then maybe an hour later something else happens, and then maybe a day later than that something else happens, and so on and so on. But you can kind of see a ladder that might be occurring, and hopefully that can kind of give you an indication of what's actually been going on here, right? So again, all about making sure that we can present the information to the analysts as quickly as possible so they can respond and resolve the event as quickly as possible, right? You can then hover on anything here, and then it'll show you the key kind of fields that are inside here, so you can see different applications, actions, objects, all sorts of different things that might be relevant here, different notables and why they've been coming up, sources, all sorts of different things, and the users that are involved, of course. So that's all very good. And if you click search here, you can go straight into and actually see these events that you've selected. You can also share that with anybody else that you wish to, or you can create a notable event from here as well. Okay, so this viewpoint is very, very useful. Not only do we have it for identities, we also have it for assets as well. So if you want to explore assets in a similar viewpoint, and again, as you can see, nice edit button here, so everything is changeable. If you want to add in your own swim lanes, you can do that. If you want to remove them, there's a number that come out of the box that aren't even shown, but you can also add and edit how you want to make this viewpoint better for you and your analysts. So we've looked into it, we've got an event, we've looked into it, now we deem it of being of interest, right? So now what we're going to do is actually select this. We're going to go edit, we're going to add this to an investigation, okay? And we're going to create a new investigation, and this investigation is going to be demo investigation. It's going to be new. We can add some information about it. We go ahead and save that, and then we can go and have a look at it, right? So investigations is really taking it to the next level, right? So I'm going to start from the timeline view. So here we can see the actual event, the notable event that we've added into this. That's the only thing that's in here at the moment. You can see it from the slide view or from the list view. What I want to do right now is just add in a note. So I'm going to add in a new note, and I'm going to say started investigation. The time frame that I started it, maybe 10 minutes ago from this. Show it on the timeline. Could add in a particular note, or I could attach something. Maybe I've done some images that I want to attach, or anything else that I might have grabbed that I want to attach into the investigation. I'm going to do that as well. So we can add that in. So now I've got that particular note added in, and I can see when it was that I started the investigation, even though the notable event was generated first. And again, if I want to go back through the slide view, I can go ahead and do it that way, and I can see what it was that I changed and so forth. I can then get a summary of the event, so you can see the notable events that have been pulled in. And with that notable event, I've actually pulled in a few artifacts, right? So I've pulled in the user account, and I pulled in the 2 assets that user account logged onto, right? Because of this, right? So they've been pulled into this investigation. So you can see these are as artifacts that then can be explored. And if I come back to the workbench view, and maybe I want to select the fire door, and I can go ahead and explore that, right? And then I'll get a number of different searches triggered on FireDoor to see what has been occurring with this user account, right? So here's my risk modifiers over time when it's been happening, what my IDS saying about that particular user account, what notable events has that user account been involved in, system vulnerabilities, computer inventory, not relevant to a user, endpoint data probably less relevant to a user account, certainly maybe I could explore that, SMTP, email going in and out, network traffic that users involved in, risk, lots of different things. I could also add in any of these sort of dashboard panels to kind of explore and look into this user account, right? And what might be going on. So there's a lot of different risky things that have been occurring. We can go and see that as well. I apologize for the resolution, not being able to necessarily see everything here. Good. So yeah, so we can do some exploration. We can go and do that. Now maybe I want to close this off. I can say, yeah, I'm all good now. I can close it off as well. And that will close those notables too that go inside with it. Let's go and close that notable. If I want to close that off, and I can do it from here. It was basically telling you need to close the notables to really fully go through the investigation. So here it is. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to just say it's now closed. It's critical. I'm going to just say I did it. And then also what you can do, which many people might not realize in enterprise security, is set the disposition of why you've been closing it, right? So is it true positive? Was it suspicious activity? Was it a benign one? It's kind of known about, but actually suspicious. It's actually not supposed to be happening, but it's expected. Or maybe there's a false positive right here. So why is it a false positive? Is the logic wrong or is the data wrong? And you can add in the dispositions if you wish as well. By default, it's all undetermined. You can also just go with the other, or if you can always, I would advise you to set a disposition as to why it's being closed off. So in this case, let's say it was a false positive, the logic wasn't correct. It saves changes. So we closed it off, it wasn't correct. So I've gone through my process here, right? I've investigated it, I've used the dashboards in enterprise security, or at least some of them, and I've closed it off. So now when we look at it from this kind of the metrics perspective, and there's a couple of dashboards under security posture here for this. So we've got the executive summary and the SOC operations. So let's load up the executive summary, even if I did have it loaded before. We're going to look at 24-hour period simply because I don't have data for 7 days in this environment. So I'm just going to flick the switch to 24 hours. So what we can see is it's going to load the mean time to triage, the mean time to resolution, about all of the different events that have occurred. We're going to see the number of investigations that were created. So that was my 3rd investigation today. So we've got an 8-minute mean time to triage. That's gone up 8 minutes from yesterday because this environment wasn't here yesterday. So, you know, but you can kind of see how things are progressing and see how we can able to reduce things because we've got these metrics now that we're looking at and kind of making security operations better. We can see the different types of events as they go over time, and lots of different other metrics that we can be looking at, different areas that we can be looking at, risk events happening, sources not contributing to risk notables. So you can also see things that are going in with risk. Risk is now very embedded into the latest versions of enterprise security. So if you're not looking at RBA, mentioned it a couple of times, but not really focusing on it, do have a look at it. And you can also see what correlation searches have been turned on or disabled over time as well. So this will run every hour and it will show you how many are enabled, how many are disabled, and you can see that kind of metrics of what's going on with your environment over time as well. So that's the executive summary. And then the other dashboard that I talked about was the SOC operations. So this is also a very good kind of viewpoint of the metrics. Again, if I hit it over 24 hours, so these are the key metrics, the workload for particular analysts, and this is where dispositions really come in, right? So yeah, again, what's the workload over time? Who are the analysts that are closing the most, right? So you can kind of assess your analysts as well. And again, mean time to triage and to respond, the disposition over time, so what's happening mostly over time, and the different data sets that are contributing to different types of dispositions, right? So if we've got a lot of false positives, which use cases are triggering it, right? So no longer do you have to go and analyze each of these use cases. It's being analyzed as you go through the process, right? As you continually go through and actually work on the system, you can now actually get these metrics that allows you to improve them and take them to the next level. So that was all I wanted to show you today. Thank you very much for joining me. There is a lot more in enterprise security. If you want to have an intro to enterprise security or go into any more depth, please join me for one of those. I'm just kind of focusing on the metrics, kind of how we can kind of think about operations. Any other thing that you want to come to me or to Somerford is our website. You should be able to just ask in there and find details around the next event. Certainly join the third one, which will be hosted by Stu, and he's going to talk about how we can optimize our environment and take things to the next kind of level. So no longer are we just, you know, looking at how we can respond and how we can reduce those. Now we're actually talking about automation, right? Let's talk about how we can use automation to kind of reduce everything down to machine speed and kind of really get those to the best, and how that can be. So I'll leave him with all those details. He'll come and tell you all the information. Don't want to spoil it for you. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining me. Hope to see you again on a future webinar.